Do you need me to mute?
There we are. We are live, and we're joined by the folks at OER 17 in a hallway conversation. So we may meet some interesting folks. Hi, Autumn. Say hi.
Hey, Helen. I'm here with Martin.
Hiya.
And I've got Christian too. Come say hi.
Hi, Helen. How are you?
Hey, Christian.
So we're doing this session a little bit differently. We're doing a walk-by session. I'm trying to keep us away from, there's like a big party in the other room, but I'm trying to give us a space where we're not going to have too many people walking by, but where you can still hear us. So I apologize if there's like some audio issues.
And I think what we'll do is wait and introduce the virtual folks after you guys get a chance to get walked by people, just so that because we know you guys are on a tight time limit.
Okay, well, I've got Meha here. Come here.
Yay!
Hi.
Hello.
I promised to come, so I'm gonna go
Go
find
get
them.
them.
Right?
Go get them.
Oh, Martin's gonna go find
I
them.
got a kiss from Meha.
Yay! Hi, everybody. I'm seeing Terry, Simon, Rebecca.
That picture you posted when you met, that was so nice.
It was great, right? With them in the tie-dye, they were so adorable.
Yeah.
The photo was so cute.
Tomorrow we have Be Less Pigeon matching t-shirts, right?
Yes, and I'm wearing my BLS pigeon too.
Oh, Rebecca, do that again.
Yes.
Rebecca's got hers on. Hey, Rebecca's got hers on.
Already. I think she left around lunchtime. Look who I got.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. We heard that Canadians were trending at OER.
Yeah, Canadians made a big difference here, as usual. I think hockey is now the national sport in England.
Oh, that would be a switch.
Well, you know it's not the national sport in Canada, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, it's an interesting conference in that, just like last year, OER 16, OER 17 seems to be like in the ruins of open. Like after the funding and after everything else, there are people who are still committed to the idea of trying to build it. And that community that I think a lot of us are looking for, I think has materialized, at least for me. I mean, just came out of Brian Lamb's, it's a good segue, Brian Lamb's open infrastructure section. And that was a kind of very nice presentation. Brian, can you talk a little bit about what you just talked about?
I could try. So essentially it was a group of us that you can actually see all our materials at oer17.opened.ca. And essentially we were just kind of talking about the technology side of open education and how hard it can be to run good open platforms by yourself. I've actually been depending on Jim Groom's company to do certain things, but that's meant that I'm essentially having to be a system administrator, which I'm okay for doing for my own stuff, but makes me nervous when other people are putting exams online or student work and portfolios for graduate degrees. It just terrifies me. So we've been looking for ways where smaller organizations like mine can pool our labor to essentially try to create the kind of stability and enterprise grade and professional security type services for open online technologies like WordPress, but to do it in a way that we can feel confident that these are going to be stable and useful for people. So the thing that's been kind of fun about that is we've been thinking, well, how does that work? How do we allow people to collaborate with us? Who gets to join? We can't just offer free support to anybody that wants to use our open platform, but we want to make it available to people. So we've actually been exploring the cooperative model, whether, much like co-op housing, co-op food co-ops, it's a whole thing. So we've actually been looking at the governance model of the co-op as a mechanism to essentially create, you actually use the word, something like a barter system for services. So we're happy to host your site for you and your students. The idea is then you're making a commitment that when new users after you come aboard and start using the service, that you'll make an effort to support those people. So we're going to see how it works, but the co-op model is an attempt to essentially formalize that a little bit, not just make it completely volunteer based.
And it's a great model to think about what I just said with, like, in the moment when there isn't funding, maybe you know, Brian had said in this presentation, which was great, like our model, like the grant, the money we're looking for is 10 to 15,000 Canadian. So we don't want your grants. We don't want your external funding. We want community and people to be the infrastructure that helps us think. And I thought that was really cool.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. And I just want to say one of my favorite moments was a Brian Lamb impersonation of Jim Broom.
Oh my.
I can't do that just on demand, you know. I'm not just a performing monkey. You want me to come out here and talk like Jim Broom just because that's what you say?
I told you it was good, right? I gotta take this bag off. I'm sorry. Who do we got next? Brian Mathers?
Yeah.
Look at this. Oh my God. He's
Brian!
How do I need to
Have
get
to
my
say-
selfie stick.
Remember that program, Police Squad?
Brian Mathers, Helen from Ontario. Hi.
Yeah, here. Nice to see you all. How many of you are on there?
Oh, we got a room
A
full.
load of people. It's really hard to hear because there's all the people making loads of noise. But, what am I supposed to talk about? Am I supposed to talk about?
So Brian's doing some amazing stuff with visualizations. If you've seen some of these like amazing pictures coming out on his Twitter account, they're just really great. Could you talk a little bit about your process, maybe?
Yeah. So, I've just done a session with Maren. I'm just bending into the picture here.
I'm doing my best. I know you're doing
Because
wonderful. Thank you.
you are doing it. So we used that conversational method to work with the trustees of the Association of Learning Technologists to ask them what their values were while I sort of visually scribed. And we turned those into sort of little thoughts that then turned into essentially the elements of their visual strategy. And so I was just outlining that process. But I found that, whenever you get passionate people talking about stuff that means a lot to them in a conversational environment, they use metaphors, and if you're listening, you can almost sort of pick them out and turn them into little sketches. And so that's okay. So my method is to take those and to go as wide as possible, but to see if somehow they allow you to look at things more objectively, because you can see them as an image. So that's the name of the game.
Well, I've just been really loving your work. I love how you pull out those little pieces, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. They did use that metaphor. And now, like, I can see it right there in front of me, and it's always a treat whenever you're online and doing that.
Thank you. Well,
And
it's
congratulations, Brian. Brian, congratulations on the award.
Hi.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased. I've never won an award before. I'm delighted to have won my first ever award for something meaningful. I salute you all. Thank you.
I get worried. And did you want to be in this too?
Yeah,
Come
why
on
not?
in. Introduce yourself. So we got
Hi there.
Hello, hi. I'm Markus from Germany. I'm glad to speak to you live from the OER 17. This is my first time being on site. I watched a couple of weeks ago remotely.
Okay.
Yes. So I liked it. So I want to give something back to you, to the community. I really like the concept of virtually connecting. I think it's great, and using technology to connect people.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to be here.
It brings us closer.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tina. I'm actually doing a PhD here in the UK at the Open University, and I'm looking how MOOC educators find out about copyright. Actually, I presented this, but my project for the PhD is on how MOOC educators learn how to teach environments. Yeah, that's me. I can't hear you. Does anyone talk?
Yes, we do.
We certainly do.
We're muting ourselves because the conversation there is very interesting.
Where are you based?
Oh, all over. Can we do a quick run through and some people can just tell us where they're from?
Absolutely. Let's start with Dina.
go into the keynote.
Yeah, is it time for us to go?
Oh, we
Actually,
get
we
that.
need to run. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
We need to go for the keynote.
For the
I'll tell her
keynote.
Okay.
See you later.
It was nice to see you all.
Bye. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye Autumn. Okay, they've gone. Oh my goodness. That's a drive-by hallway conversation. That was for sure. So maybe we can just take a moment and introduce everybody and then maybe just talk about one thing that just stuck out from one of the conversation flybys, drop-ins. Terry, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Terry. I'm a learning technology strategist and a fellow OEO Ranger with Helen in Ontario, Open Red Rangers. We got patches. That was cool. Anyway, what else was I supposed to say?
That was good. And maybe Simon and then Rebecca.
Yeah, hi, I'm Simon Enso, and I'm based in Clermont-Ferrand, which is in France, in the center of France, where we have volcanoes, which at the moment are extinct, thank God. And I teach English at the university, and I sort of get lost in space.
All right, and I'm Rebecca. I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting. I'm located in Sunnyvale, California, where it is sunny today. We're getting lots of rain this winter, which is crazy, but good. And I just wanted to comment that this session was very like our very first ones at ET for Online. We did a lot of, because most of what we were doing was that on the cell phone flyby kind of thing. And so some of the issues that can come up, like the audio quality and that kind of stuff. And so it's interesting to see the looking at a session sort of like the roots of what we were very, very early on.
Cool. Mia, Mark, and Graham or Scott?
Hi guys, it's Mia. I am in New Jersey, about maybe 15, 20 minutes from New York City at Kean University, where I teach both writing and literature. I am currently really into alchemy.
Fair enough.
Mark, are you there? Okay, Graham.
Briefly, my journey into open started about 10 years ago. I was involved in patient advocacy work. Can you hear me?
Your microphone is really garbled.
I thought it was working earlier. Is it still pretty bad?
No. Mm-hmm. Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay. So I unmuted myself. I'm Mark Wilson. I'm in Oakland, California, and I'm retired and a student, and I'm beginning to realize after attending all these conferences that apparently I'm representing all the workers of the world amongst all you educators.
How so?
Because everybody's an educator. There are no students. There are no staff. There are no janitors. Let's get some janitors in here. Tell us what's really going on. But I plan on being a student for the rest of my life, so I'll do what I can.
Now I see a space for Dina, but I don't see her online. Are you there? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think she's on mute if she's there.
Okay. So one item that you caught from the quick conversation we had from all the folks at the OER. Just jump in.
I think that co-op thing is really cool. And I like that they articulated it in the context of finding resources in the human resource sense in the face of different kinds of resources. Because I think that's what the world needs, is relationships that flourish, new ideas, creativity, collaboration, seeing pathways to do things differently and that haven't worked. I think if we leaned into human resources more than other forms of resources, maybe just in the face of a lack of, that would get further than we think we can.
And it's interesting that Brian Mathers was in the same conversation in conversational space almost, because he's part of a co-op with Doug Belcourt and Laura Hilliger. They've got something in the UK around an open co-op.
Is that like a spring off of their Mozilla work or something different than that?
I think it's something totally different, that they've created this open cooperative. So the challenge with people, there's still a need to find the finances to support the people, to give credit or honor the time that it takes to do the work.
I think Helen just said exactly what I was getting at in the chat. On the side there is sort of like that the co-op model. The challenge with it that I see with a lot of this stuff is that really the people who are already underemployed end up over contributing as well, and then there's no way to compensate the people that aren't already getting a paycheck for the work that they're doing. And what's happening there is, of course, they're also the people that typically have more time to do the contributions. And so they tend to contribute more and yet are still not getting any, they still have to pay the rent.
Yeah, very interesting. And I was noticing because of the Creative Commons Global Summit is coming up at the end of April, and they've got all the sessions. One of them is about a Kickstarter campaign that they used to create a Creative Commons open source book. So I'm interested to see how that works. And a couple of the sessions are around not monetizing, but kind of that back end funding for open work, Creative Commons work.
Yeah, more of a compensation rather than amortizing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was nice to meet Brian Mathers, because he does some really interesting graphics for all kinds of purposes. So it was nice to see.
His work reminds me very much of Julia Forsyth's, because that was the first person that I met that did that kind of stuff too, and she does this amazing stuff.
She was at Terry and I were at a one-day session about a week ago called OEO Rangers, and it was funded by eCampus Ontario to bring people from across the province together and work on understanding about open. And Robin DeRosa and Rajiv were keynote speakers, and open content. Terry, help me out. Who's the guy from BC that Skyped in?
Dave Wiley Skyped in at the
Yes.
start.
Yeah.
He's in Utah, isn't he?
Oh, okay.
Open content. That's his Twitter handle.
Open content. I just thought he's open content. Just like I go by the Twitter handles more.
But there are also lots of folks from BC campus there throughout the day. Amanda Coolidge and what's his name, Clint Lalonde, each doing breakout sessions. It was pretty great.
Yeah. So where was I going with this conversation?
You just wanted to show off your patch.
I was wondering actually this today, the whole business of resources and content, because there's been a lot of in the first instance of open, a lot of it was about content and resources, and the talk of Brian, who's talking about relationships and cooperative. For me, this is really the real key issue: is what are the relationships, and in particular, what are the relationships in terms of power and in terms of the ability to have sustainable relationships. I think for me that these are the real key issues.
We have some conversation going on in the chat. Bring it into the open.
Yeah, the chat's not a
I was just going to type in, I'm in agreement with what Simon just said, and I'm also kind of thinking about overcoming old structures in innovative ways, and meaning the old structures that, you know, sort of rely on contingent labor without supporting them in any concrete way. I'm just trying to think about how we can flip all of that framework in some way and support people in significant ways without looking for like the grant, you know. I don't know, my thoughts were stuck, which is why I wasn't talking out loud, so I'm going to be quiet again.
Sometimes talking through it and you think, okay, yeah, how do you get let's say credit, get resources from what you're producing, what you're creating, and putting out in the open. And I think it's an ongoing challenge for a lot of people.
Another argument for the universal basic income. There are so many.
Yeah, good point.
So that's a really important point, Mark. I think then that comes down to like moving mountains in regards to the direction varying societies are moving in. And then the thoughts really get stuck about like where you are in the midst of all that and what you can do. So as an individual, I mean, yeah, so I'm going to again be quiet while all the things pop around.
Well, I know that I'm looking at, you know, finishing a bachelor's, probably getting a master's, and I certainly can't afford to spend $200,000 doing that, especially when now that I'm old, there's no chance of, you know, getting a job in academia. So that's my particular interest, is getting some sort of alternative degree, 0 degree, open degree. I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to self-finance. I'll probably end up donating a lot to open education resources, but it's, you know, that's not a sustainable thing. That's just personal. So yeah, it's the one thing I have learned hanging out with academics the last couple of years is things don't look very bright, especially if you talk to Brian Alexander and his future predictions about the economics of higher ed. It just looks tough.
It's really true. I think it's like we're dinosaurs, and it's just a matter of how long the extinction will take. I think that all the time, especially when I'm sitting in department meetings and watching the grumble that occurs within a very insular context and not connecting that with a broader context of contingent labor and a kind of shift in the way we communicate overall in the world. And, you know, so yeah. Where do we go?
I've spent way too much time in meetings as a student representative. I logged almost 3 years of meetings in shared governance at different levels. I'm in a 4 college district, so there's plenty of meetings. And I can't even say, I mean, literally cannot say what it looks like from a worker who worked, 20 years in Silicon Valley with 0 management or administration, 0 meetings, 0 paperwork. because we were that libertarian. The owners worked in the same shop as the workers, and everybody knew what they were doing. There was no need for meetings or paperwork. That's just a tremendous waste of time and money. And to go from that to a fairly dysfunctional four-college community college district where all they do is sit in meetings and talk about how someday they're going to get out of Microsoft Outlook. That conversation has been literally going on for a decade in that district. So,
yeah, you just painted a picture that's painfully familiar to me, and I sit through so many moments like this, just like in holding back the internal eye roll, because, and I try to like redirect the work in the actual work, the work I do with students, the work I do with colleagues on the outside, like whatever activist work I've taken up. But yeah, we're dinosaurs.
I think I'm going to just connect it to something David Wiley said last week, and it was around someone who talked about the monetization and the money. And again, this is from publishers around what the value of open content, open textbooks would be. And he said ultimately it's determined by student learning. And I think you just hit it, Mia, because if we're not focused on the students and the student learning that comes out of what we do, then I don't think we're kind of focusing the right direction.
Yeah, and the students always teach me. That's what keeps me going, is so much that I take away from that experience. That's where my energy lies.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a disenfranchised voice that I think we need to encourage and invite and bring into the open, in these open conversations that we've had. It's nice to see there's one student session happening at the OLC Innovate conference for virtually hanging with students, which is a nice kind of direction for virtually connecting to move to.
yes, I've been pointing out for years in my district that all these decisions about platforms, open education resources, just all of the technology decisions are all made, for the students, and they never, bother to ask the students who are, light years in advanced in the use of some technology. I mean, obviously not all of it, but so I spent years lobbying for that. And we had the problem where California went through, the whole world went through an economic crisis, but California in particular, and the budget cuts they just slashed all the student services. So we have no service for our student governments. We have no support. It's just we're not training student leaders. It's just an endless cycle of dysfunction.
So just, I'm conscious of the time too, because I know we're having a hallway conversation after the hallway conversation from OER. Anything you see from the OER stream and keynotes, everything seems to be in the open. So it's going to take us a while to digest some of the content and the contributions from the people at the conference. Anything you've seen that caught your attention so far?
Oh, if you're speaking to me, I was again.
Anybody.
The idea of a cooperative. I mean, that's brilliant. That's where things are going to have to go. So, I already pulled that up and have a browser page open. I'll be going there directly after this.
Dina, if you want to type something into the chat window and we can just mention it so that we can at least have a chance to hear your voice. Anybody else want to jump in? Something they've picked up from the OER?
I watched Maha's keynote this morning when I woke up, and it was what a great day to start the day. I was really inspired by it, in all honesty, because I saw a lot of my own sort of approach to things and the way she approached the room. I just liked seeing her taking the lead and having people turn around and introduce themselves to people they didn't know, and making it first and foremost about the relationships we build. And she mentioned a couple of times the spiritual, which, you know, in other academic contexts is not a welcome move. It's something that is seen as a little too soft or a little too, you know, feminine. So I really enjoyed watching her presentation, which was chock full of research and you know, assertions regarding where open needs to go in the future. But more than anything, I just enjoyed watching someone that I relate to taking that platform and doing something really effective with it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. It was nice to see the conversation evolve as she engaged with the audience. Rebecca, anything that jumped out for you?
You know, mostly, you know, the co-op idea, which I think is a very interesting one. And I just sort of got tied up in the Twitter stream. I've been looking at what's going on with the keynote that's happening now. But I'm only halfway through Meha's keynote. But I love the way that she brought in people's responses and, you know, used the ones that were in the room, but also used the ones that weren't in the room and brought that space in. And I thought it was interesting. I'm still curious. I also have to go see how our session went, because we did a session today as well. And I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if Mia has had a chance to see it yet either. I got to figure out where they were going to Periscope it.
I haven't seen it, but there were some tweets that came in real time that it was happening, because they were saying Rebecca and Mia are talking right now. I'm like, yay, I'm not here. But so that's kind of fun when you realize that you're being screened with your thought, you know, like your thoughts are being shared that you put in the can a little bit earlier, and then it's happening.
And the irony of it, Mia and I, for people that don't know, we're talking about the online experience with virtually connecting, not online, on-site experience with virtually connecting. And we were the only two people who weren't on site. And that's what we were talking about. So I thought it was really kind of funny.
It does feel almost disconnected to you know, you feel like you're in the room when you're really not in the room. Simon, anything that's jumped out for you? You've mentioned a few things.
People. That's all. People laughing. People just being present. Whether that be present online or present, just present. And also this idea of present. I mean, the fact that they're present is a present. I have too many students, or know too many teachers, and they're never present, ever, even when they're present. And I think
that's good. That's good. Yeah, very true.
Nothing else really. The whole business of resources, copyright, and all that just sends me to sleep. I just want to scream, because I can think back to years and years ago, thinking about, was this, what sort of copyright was this, and what labels I'm going to stick on it, and I don't want to go down there. I don't want to be a lawyer.
And Terry,
I'm just starstruck from seeing all those superstars pop in the OER, and I'm just looking at the Twitter feed. This is kind of a cool, I think it's from Maha's presentation, a quote from Sherry Spellick: "Inclusion is a construction project. Inclusion must be engineered." And I've seen it retweeted like 20 times. It's a pretty neat message. I can put a link to it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to contribute Dina's message here about open content is good for faculty, articles that will help students learning. The institutional repository of an institution can help do that, and student theses and dissertations could be allowed open for access to others to learn from. I think those are valuable points. Thank you, Dina.
I just had a feeling, nothing more than that, and I can't really explain. But I have a problem with the word inclusion, because for me, inclusion already implicitly says that there is exclusion, and I worry about this.
Yeah, that's been actually quite a bit of the contours of the conversation, actually. Rebecca can also weigh in on this, but that was the panel that we were not present for, but we've been trying to work through some of those ideas, and you hit the nail on the head, Simon. Basically, to even approach the issue of inclusion is to acknowledge like notions of stardom versus, you know, those who are not in the community as much or on the like liminal in some way. It's all in a way to reify those structures, those notions of power that are a part of those structures. So yeah, we've been struggling with the word, sort of thinking about it, but then like essentially coming at it head on through the conversations we've tried to have. And I'm quite sure that Martin and Maha and Sue were able to impart that in some way in the panel that occurred earlier. But I wish I knew what kind of like was dredged up there. I'm just as curious as anyone else, even though I was contributing to the earlier parts of the conversation.
I just come back on what you just said, Mia, because as for all of us, we have these stories of inclusion, exclusion in all parts of our lives, and one thing that people in parts of our lives is essential. That's for sure, because our relationships with people are on different modes and different levels of closeness, and people can understand things which other people can't, etc. But for me, the real issue in terms of inclusion, as what you said about power, is do we actually want people to be included in systems which are fundamentally oppressive? And I just always think back to this idea of, did I want brown shoes? I didn't want brown shoes. This was a privilege. So in order for me to get to this privilege of having brown shoes at school, for me, the whole thing was a nonsense. And I think a lot of what we're actually faced with is more and more a nonsense. And I think that expresses how people are saying we're all dinosaurs and we're disenfranchised, because in fact, the system is slowly, gradually eating up the spaces of privilege which exist, and less is left for the people who are in the past would think, oh, I have privilege. Well, I think there's less and less of it. And I think that what these sort of conversations can bring to us, and this is what I would see my role as, is actually bringing people together to have conversations about what concerns all of us. And it's everywhere. Even those people who are not present in spaces like these, they're present. They're present in the discussion. The people who have no possibility to connect, they're still present, whether that be by mining resources to produce machines, or whether that be being viewed as resources or viewed as obstacles in territory where people want to extract or expropriate or exploit. And I think that we have to start thinking in terms of what actually brings us together, and what are these stories which we're all feeling, and then think about how do we actually reflect on, at least between ourselves, thinking about what's the relationships do we want. It's about what we have to do, because that's the system.
it made me think of Mark's comment about the different roles that people play in institutions. In the open, there are different roles that people can play, and they individually need to find a space that they can be comfortable in, I guess. Be present. So, shall we do a final wrap up? Any final comments? And then we will stop our broadcast and wait for the next virtually connecting session to come up tomorrow. Any final thoughts?
Lots of final thoughts, and they're not fully formed, which is a good thing in a way, because it's just something to meditate on. But I'll say one little thing, which is simply that I liked what Simon just said about we need to make choices. Of course, you're not going to listen. You're not going to include everyone. You simply can't, and that it's part of being human. And then he moved on to the problem of power, which is very much in a vein of social justice, which I certainly share, the concern I share with him. But I'm going to meditate on that, the part about we need to sometimes know that we're not, like we need to sit in the reality of not including. I have to think about that more, but it was helpful to me in spurning further effervescing brain waves. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
I liked what Simon said about the shrinking of privilege. Again, being a worker, I've been using the word fascism since 1980 when Ronald Reagan got elected. And working in Silicon Valley, even though it was the libertarian Wild West, a lot of people did make changes in their social status through different ways. I mean, some people that I worked with worked in a factory and yet running a cleaning service at night. There were opportunities, however you want to categorize them. And now, again, being older and being in the educational thing, I'm observing people who chose to go into hierarchies, that chose to go into these structures, and they were insulated for a while from this. And now the monster is now clawing through that space. So I hope it brings us all together eventually, so that we stand together and do what we can.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so I'm going to stop broadcast, and we can stay and chat a little bit more after we finish with the session.